What's up everybody? In today's video we have the Canon PowerShot V1, or do we? And we're getting rumors about a new next generation PowerShot that we're going to be seeing at the end of this year that will be a super zoom, which was another very popular thing in the PowerShot family. So I want to jump in and talk about the PowerShots and kind of what it means and whether or not Canon can actually take on Sony and the other competitors in this space. So as expected, Canon has announced and released kind of the Canon PowerShot V1. It is initially going to be released only in Asian markets, which is kind of interesting. It'll be widely available in March. And while US retailers have seen the camera, right, they've been briefed on it from Canon, likely US distribution won't happen until sometime in April, potentially. Most of the information that we had and that I had made videos about over the last month or so came out to be about accurate, and hopefully we'll see more hands-on information about the camera as folks start releasing information as they've had their experiences. But right now I just kind of want to go down through the specs of the V1 specifically before we jump into talking about the market and what the V3 is going to look like down the road. So as expected, the PowerShot V1 is a replacement, a successor to the GX7 Mark III. It has a 22 megapixel sensor, which is a 1.4 inch sensor. It's about 80% larger than your traditional 1-inch sensor than you find in a compact camera, meaning that if you compare the images in this camera to, say, the GX7 Mark III, you're going to see considerably better image quality because the pixels are just larger. The lens was somewhat as expected, 16 to 50 millimeter equivalent. Again, I think this is the perfect range for this type of camera. It gives you that super wide view for vlogging, content creators, landscape, and kind of editorial type photography and videography. So I really do like that range. And obviously at 50 millimeters, you've got a great portrait lens, very good for video. There's a lot here to really like. We were seeing numbers like 1.8 to 2.8, and unfortunately it's come in quite a bit higher than that at 2.8 to f4.5, which is really about the same as what we saw previously out of the GX7. The 1.4 inch sensor in this camera is actually a cut down or a sliver out of the same sensor that we have in the R7. And that's a great camera and that's a great sensor. But just remember that the R7 sensor is actually a refresh version of the same sensor that we got in the 90D and the M6 Mark II. So this sensor now is kind of getting its third life in this camera, especially as we expect to see the R7 Mark II adopt a more advanced, faster sensor for its next iteration. Canon is touting great dynamic range and low light performance. It takes the LPE17 battery, which is in keeping with Canon's smaller APS-C cameras, so you can actually swap this battery between some of the other mirrorless APS-C cameras that you have in the Canon lineup. So I've already mentioned that the slightly lower resolution and the slower glass associated with this camera makes it a little less enticing than I was anticipating. But additionally, not only is there no built-in flash, and no EVF, which I anticipated, I'm not seeing any mention in the kind of reported accessories that there would be a slide-on EVF available using the accessory hot shoe that Canon has, which they did with the GX7. It was kind of funny looking, but it was an option that you could purchase for that camera and an option in some of the M series cameras. And I think that was cool if you didn't just want to be using the rear tilt screen. Speaking of the rear screen, it is that 3-inch variable angle tilt screen that we have in many of our Canon cameras. So that is exciting. But again, the EVF, I think, or at least the option for an EVF would have been appreciated. The other thing that we're hearing from folks is, as a reaction to this camera, is the lack of telephoto reach. But we'll talk about that when we talk about the V3. This zoom range is pretty much exactly what we were anticipating. Some cool features that it does have packed in are the built-in 3-stop ND. It has optical image stabilization, and it has active cooling, which if you'd asked me a year ago if people would want active cooling in a PowerShot compact camera, I would say no. But because this camera can shoot full width 4K 30 in 10-bit and cropped 4K 60, I'm not terribly surprised because the Digic X processor can get warm, even though it does have Dual Pixel Autofocus 2, although they're calling it Dual Pixel Autofocus 2 for PowerShot. And that 4K 60 mode that is cropped at 1.4, that reduces the effective resolution to about 11 megapixels. So they're still using, I'm going to assume, pixel binning as opposed to oversampling, and it's definitely not a one-to-one readout. Interestingly, if you use the 4K 60 mode with that 1.4 crop, you get the equivalent of a 22-70 on that lens system. So how does the V1 stack up against what I think is its #1 competitor, which is the Sony ZV-1 Mark II? It does have a much larger sensor. It is 80% larger with the same resolution. So those photo sites are going to be considerably better, so you can anticipate better low light performance, better dynamic range, lower noise, that sort of thing. It's also going to have that 4K 60 mode, which the ZV-1 has. Now the Sony can shoot in 60p, but only in HD. So as I mentioned in a previous video, the Canon does have the leg up on Sony in that regard. And the Canon does now have, as we mentioned before, that product demonstration mode in its autofocus system, so that when you put something in front of the camera, it'll focus on that. Again, for content creators and influencers who are using this camera to create content for, say, like an Amazon storefront. And because these aren't interchangeable lens cameras, the ecosystem part of it is not really the same. You could potentially jump from one camera to the other without a significant hit, because unless you're heavily invested in some of the other accessories, lenses aren't really an issue here because they're not interchangeable. You're not going to be using RF glass. However, I would say that pairing something like the R50 with even a kit zoom would be just a little bit more expensive, but probably a better long-term investment, though heavier and much larger. And clearly where the Sony absolutely takes the win here is in the memory card configuration. Both have SD cards, but only the Sony comes with Memory Stick Duo. So now, as the replacement of the GX7 Mark II, Mark III, the V1 obviously now positions itself at the top of the PowerShot line for Canon. My hope really is that Canon maintains this nomenclature and that they don't get off into the weeds as they've done in the past by adding a whole bunch of different lines here. The PowerShot line has had so many different variations over the last 20 years. We had the A and TX series, the D, the E, and the S series. And then most recently, we've had the G, which is indicated kind of the top of the line product, and the SX, which SX stood for super zoom, and those were their zoom products. But then they would throw HS on the end of their products to say that it was high speed. So that's how you end up with a product like the SX740HS. I would much prefer something simpler like the V3. And I bring up the SX740HS because it looks like we're going to be getting a successor to it, similar to how the GX7 Mark III is being replaced by the V1. And the SX740 was a 40 by optical compact camera with a small compact camera body. It just had a lot of reach. And that was a really popular camera. So it was a 24 to 960 millimeter equivalent zoom. It had a 1/2.3 inch sensor, so it was a very small sensor, even smaller than the 1-inch sensors that we've been talking about these cameras replacing. It didn't have an EVF, it didn't have a mic input, it didn't have a lot of things, but it had a zoom, and a lot of people really loved the zoom. So what we're expecting now is the V3 to replace the SX740HS in a zoom version of the V line. So what are we expecting out of the V3? Well, we don't know a whole lot yet. We know that it's probably going to come out at the end of the year. We know that it'll use the same sensor as the V1, so the same 22 megapixel sensor that is itself a chip off the R7, which is itself a refresh of the 90D. So this would effectively be the 4th time that we would see this sensor in a new camera, or at least a piece of it. And while it will be a zoom camera, it's not going to be anything like the Nikon P1100, and honestly it won't even be as extreme as the SX70 or the SX740. So it will be a 22 megapixel sensor that will be paired with what we think is going to be a 24 to 480 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent zoom range. So it's a 20 by zoom, but 480 millimeters is nothing to sneeze at. We'll know more as the rumor mill works and as we get closer to the potential release towards the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year. This is going to be a Christmas item. We do expect the possibility of it having a built-in EVF, whereas the V1 doesn't. because honestly, the expectation is the V1 is going to be held out, whereas you would be putting the V3 against your eye, or likely having the V3 on a tripod. I'm sure it'll have optical image stabilization, but at 480 millimeters, you're going to need a stable footing. And this is definitely going to be a photography first camera. It also likely will not have the same active cooling as the V1, as it will likely not have some of the video features that the V1 has. One area that I would like to just point out, and this is where the nerdiness comes in, is I had to do some math on this. Because with that same sensor size and with this equivalent zoom range, I doubt that they would make the 24 millimeter end of this camera faster than the 16 millimeter end of the V1, the flagship. So assume that we're gonna start at least at 2.8. Honestly, I think we're probably gonna start at 3.5, which makes sense if you look at the SX740 that this camera will kind of replace. That one started at 3.3. And again, we're talking about 35 millimeter equivalents with everything that we're discussing here today with these cameras. So assuming that we're gonna start at about 3.5, the long end of the SX740 was 6.9. And considering the fact that this will be a larger camera with a larger sensor, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that at the absolute fastest, we might see 6.3. I think 7.1 is more likely, and f8 should not be something that would surprise us. So what should we expect next? I think we're gonna see other cameras in this V line, and we may see updates to things like a V5 or a V50, but Canon has said publicly that they are planning on really investing in the PowerShot line in their small sensor, compact, fixed lens camera systems. And this is a decent start. But the days of cheap, tiny, low quality, compact cameras, I think, is pretty much gone. And I think for these camera manufacturers to even get into the game, they've got to be charging $600, $700, $800 at a minimum. I like the idea of the V1 as the flagship and the V3 as the zoom model. I think they could have done a little bit more to compete with Sony in this space. And I think that now Sony has a huge opportunity to leapfrog them with just a few updates to the ZV-1. Again, the V1 is getting its global release in March, and we should be seeing it here in the US in April. The V3 we should see towards the latter half of this year, along with a bunch of other Canon cameras that we're expecting, like the R3 Mark II, the R7 Mark II, and the R7V and the R50V, which I did a video about, and I will link that video here. And as soon as I get new information on those cameras, I will be making a video for you. And if that's the type of thing that you're looking for, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, as well as the like button, and turn on the bell to be notified when I make new videos. That's a quick, easy, and free way to support the channel. If you want to support me just a little bit more, I've got my Instagram giveaway going on. I do have a video that explains that. I am giving away gear that I receive for review to folks who follow me over on Instagram. To get entered into that, go ahead and watch this video and follow those instructions. Links down below to all of my social media, as well as links to my gear list. That's another way that you can support the channel. Those are affiliate links. I do get a little bit if you purchase through those. I've got a list of everything that I use here in the studio, everything that I use when I go out to create adventure videos, everything I'm using as a paid portrait photographer, as well as my essentials list for 2025 to get started in photography. And if you're just super mega interested in supporting the channel, I do have memberships available. I've got 2 tiers available down below. One is $1 and the other one is $4. And for folks at the $4 level, they'll be getting resources and stuff that I've created for myself as a content creator and photographer that I just don't feel like selling. I'm just gonna give it out to people who are following me and members of the channel. For everyone else, I'm doing lives, we're doing chats, there's all sorts of stuff that we're gonna be planning here in the spring, and I've opened up my schedule for mini sessions, both here in Las Vegas, as well as in San Diego, and I've got a link down below to that if you wanna hire me as your portrait photographer. That's it for the news on the PowerShot V1 and the next camera for them in this line, the V3. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.